I'm Mark Dresner, and welcome to DDP TV, a special interview series featuring experts and leaders in the drug delivery and development frontier. Joining me today is Andy Donnelly. He's the head of drug delivery and device development at MEDIMMUNE. Andy, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Let's start with something that I think a lot of companies are struggling with, and that is the ability to identify, evaluate, and prioritize new delivery technologies that are coming in. As drug manufacturers struggle with this, why is it, and how can a company address this challenge, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and it is something that we struggle with on a regular basis. I mean, the drug development process is already very risky. There's lots of potential areas for failure. If you start to add additional complexity, such as drug delivery requirements, then it adds an extra level of risk. And I think that there is obvious aversion to that. The second issue, of course, is that even though it takes a relatively long time to take a drug through the development process, there is still a lot of short-term objectives, lots of fires that you have to fight on a daily basis, and so there is a tendency to focus on the short-term rather than the long-term. And I think the drug delivery opportunities and the technologies really are relatively early on in many instances and require quite a lot of development, and so that's not consistent with dealing with short-term issues. So I think it's important that organizations recognize that and build the support structure around the opportunity to evaluate drug delivery technologies and apply them in order to add value both to the company and to patients.
Now, I just want to shift gears for a second and then perhaps come back to that point. But the pharmaceutical industry is increasingly shifting focus away from small molecules and more toward biotechnology. What are the implications for drug delivery, whether it's for manufacturers, technology providers, et cetera?
I think that the implications are huge. I mean, as somebody that works in the area of drug delivery, I mean, it's great for us. It gives us a lot of opportunities. I mean, there are fundamental differences between biologics and small molecules that really mean that drug delivery plays a much more important role in biologics. Almost without exception, biologics need to be delivered by the parenteral route, by injection, via subcutaneous, intravenous, or whatever. And that naturally increases both the demand for technologies, but also the opportunities that technologies may present. And so it's a growing area, and I think the fact that biologics are becoming a greater proportion of a pharmaceutical company's portfolio, then that just feeds on to the fact that drug delivery continues to grow.
Now, I want to circle back to something that you mentioned, and that was that point about structuring around being able to identify, prioritize, and really capitalize on emerging new technologies that are important. This might be a little out there, but I'll ask anyway. How do you feel about drug manufacturers, knowing that drug delivery is now an increasingly earlier consideration in development? How do you feel about a company in-housing a delivery function versus outsourcing?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important that those that are working on drug delivery within the company have an identity, so that when a need arises, when there is an identified need to have a drug delivery solution, or contrary to that, if there's an opportunity for drug delivery to add value, that those within the organisation can identify the experts who is working on drug delivery and therefore know who to go to. Of course, that therefore requires a certain level of internal capability that has to be built to support that. And the question about whether or not we should fully internalise drug delivery activities is a more difficult one, because I'm a believer that even though we like to think that we recruit the best scientists and engineers and the brightest minds, we don't have a monopoly on all ideas. So we have to maintain a structure that allows us to have access to technologies that exist externally, and to give us the broadest choice of options that we want to consider.
Speaking of that structure, given everything we've covered here, what are the key considerations that a company should take into account when they're thinking about organizing to optimize the delivery innovation funnel, if you will?
I mean, I've already touched on at least two of those considerations. The first one, of course, being ensuring that we have a structure that allows people to focus on the long term and not just think about the short term. So you've got to make sure that there is those people are given sufficient time to think about innovative technologies and how we can apply them, and try and keep them away from the more urgent matters, which human nature, you tend to focus on those, and that can have a negative impact. The second one is having that identity, making sure that there is a body of individuals within the organisations that are experts. But actually, there is a nuance to that, because you can become victims of your own success to a certain extent, because you can't continue to add resources. It's clearly not possible. But as you build awareness of drug delivery and the advantages that it can bring, you get more and more people coming to you, more opportunities, and that brings a challenge to it as well. So you have to be willing to make changes and continue to refresh the organisational structure to make sure that it can accommodate the requirements that you have at that time, while still maintaining a focus on the long term.
Go ahead.
And yes, and the third point I was just going to say is how important it is to make sure you have all the stakeholders to buy in at senior levels and cross-functionally.
Are there any specific, last question for you, any specific traits or areas of expertise? You touched on, being subject matter experts, but for this group that would be vetting or looking for or evaluating, hunting down these new technologies on a regular basis, is there anything special that they should have?
Yeah, I mean, you're asking a lot for any one individual to have the range of expertise and skills that you need to. So you've got to build the team so that it covers as many of these options as possible. And I think it's very important you keep an eye on the long term. You think about the patient and their interaction with the drug delivery technology or the drug product, which is enabled by the technology, and balance that also with the scientific knowledge and the engineering expertise that you need to have. And ideally you get as much of that in one person as you can, but clearly there is diversity, and you've got to make use of that and have a range of different skill sets.
Sort of a cross-functional think tank type of a situation.
So everybody brings something to the table that's slightly different.
Terrific. Andy, thank you very much. And on that note, that concludes this episode of DDP TV. I'm Mark Dresner. Thanks for joining us.